It's okay to make mistakes because I firmly believe you build upon your successes, but you learn from your mistakes. And I feel a lot of America tries to do the opposite, but you learn from your mistakes. You don't learn from your successes.
Okay.
Hello, Joey and Maureen. How's it going?
I'm still recovering.
Oh yeah, recovering from what are you recovering from?
I dragged myself to a Nine Inch Nails concert 2 nights ago.
Cool.
Which was amazing to relive my youth with a bunch of other 50-year-olds dressed in black. I was also dressed in black. But I've got to show you.
Did you put a lot of thought into it? Like, did you like really like, or did you just dress in black like you're like a stagehand black, or did you like?
No. There's a lot of black in my wardrobe anyway, but a friend of mine saw the Nine Inch Nails concert in Minneapolis a few weeks ago and simply texted me, so period much period black period. And so I just thought I need to carry on. And I showed up and like there was not a color to be seen. No, nothing. But I was up in the nosebleeds, of course, with my friend Drew. But I like went crazy and was just like every song, you know, on my knees. And I've got to show you, I don't know how I can do this. Can you see the bruises?
Oh, I do. You were going crazy.
I went crazy. I'm not that sensitive. I don't know what I was doing to myself, but I had a good time is ultimately what I'm saying. Enjoyed myself some Trent Reznor.
Yeah, that's pretty good. You mean you must, how long of a show was it or whatever?
They played for about an hour 40. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. They played I'm Afraid of Americans, which is awesome. Yeah.
Was it open? Was there an opener or was it just it went right into?
Yeah, Boys Noise was an opener, which is another like an industrial, more DJ setup. And then they played with him mid-set.
Gotcha.
Did some covers of his stuff. Yeah, it was great.
That's awesome.
But exhausting. Yeah. Way past my bedtime.
I was just gonna ask, how late were you up or whatever with that?
The concert ended around 11, and then it takes me an hour to get home from that.
Oh,
I mean, I'm usually still up around that time, but I've been in bed watching TV for 3 hours. So
you're not used to this like 3D out of your house entertainment at that time. But...
what is this communication with other people? Yeah.
No, I get that. I noticed that it's like Kelly and I we joke about how if we'll let ourselves, that's why we go around and walk so much, because if we let ourselves, there's a little bit like after dinner, like 7:30, like we kind of start circling like, okay, I guess we're gonna get into bed now. And like
do we think that's an age thing or a post-COVID thing or both?
I think for us it's for sure an age thing. I don't know, for me, like in particular, it's like bed's like the best thing in the world, right? Like to get
my bed it's so comfortable.
It is like I actually don't even think, I can't even remember the last time I sat on the couch. I'm either up and about or I'm in bed. I don't really sit on the couch.
Yeah, you're not a real relaxer.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's right. Not a relaxer. I wish that I was more. Actually, that's why I have such a hard time. Like Kelly can sit, and Winston for sure too, both of them can sit and like Winston plays video games and Kelly reads, and like I can't do that, either of those things. I mean, I can do reading stuff for like my school stuff when I want to do school things. I'll sit and force myself to do it because it's like a mission then, it's about something. But to just like on a weekend when there's nothing going on, like even to sit and watch a movie is like, I don't like, that's really difficult to do. Like
sitting right now. I don't think I've ever been on a Zoom with you where you're sitting.
No, exactly. Since I got the standing thing, which has been for years now. I've had this. it's very hard for me to sit down and do stuff, which has actually made it worse though, because as I've indulged myself with the not sitting down and always moving around, when I do actually have to sit down and do something, it feels like doubly painful of like, you know, like it's like that's the thing. And that's why so many times, and I don't know if you do this too, but there's so many times where I'll get like a bunch of stuff on my to-do list, which just drags out for like weeks.
Mhm.
Like, oh, it's just on there for weeks. It's on there for weeks. Oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Da, da, da. And then when I sit down and do it, it literally takes like 10 minutes, like not an exaggeration. I just don't want to, I just put it off and then it takes 10 minutes and I'm good. And
It's pretty ubiquitous. I think we all do that to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's
Dan, did I see on Instagram, were you and Kelly at Gator Town?
Gatorland.
Gatorland.
Yes, Gatorland.
What the what?
So we were up in Orlando for something else, and so but we had some time, like downtime, and Kelly always wanted to go to Gatorland. So Gatorland's been around since 1949. The guy who owns it started, I can't remember, his name was Owen something, and it's essentially like a Disney World style amusement park. They don't have rides in the same way, or really at all. But they have all these little attractions with gators everywhere. Like they have the little baby gators, and then they have like the medium, like 3 to 5 year old gators that you can feed.
There's a gator show.
There's
They
gator
feed
show.
the gators.
Yeah, exactly. And they do the
Wow.
whole gator thing. And it's really cool because actually I took some pictures of it from Maureen actually. Actually, I'm glad you reminded me, because they're really, really good at like leaning into their kitschiness, right? So like all the signs and everything are like, nothing is serious. Like even like the lawyer sign that has like the like, you know, risk, don't get bit by gators, and like, which would normally be like, you can kind of feel the lawyer influence, but it always ends with like, you know, because you came with 3 kids, you should leave with 3 kids, or like some like little joke or something like that, you know? And so I just thought that was really cool that even after like all these years, of which I'm sure that 1949 like liability and weird things like that were, you know, was different than it is now, just in terms of like the way that they behave, but somehow they maintain that kitschiness across all parts of the organization. All the, you know, everything's a gator joke. I don't know, it was cool. It was
How
cool.
long
And
can
they
one
all-
spend at Gator Town? How long
How
before one says, I'm done with the gators?
Well, if Winston was with us, it would have been not long. I'm sure he would have been tired of the gators pretty fast. But we had a nice time. So we were there probably for like 3 hours or so, I would imagine, you know, and that was enough. I think that's the right amount of time.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty nice. Weather wasn't too bad. They did you know, yeah, it's very kitschy, and like you get the gist of it really quick.
Yeah.
But it's a nice piece of property, and they have it's actually pretty cool because they have like these boardwalks, and then the gators, the boardwalks are set up so that the gators can go underneath, right? So they're like everywhere, and there's like a ton of them. So when you look over at the side, you're about 4 or 5 feet away from the top of the water, and they're like right there. And so then all of a sudden, like a big one comes, you know, gliding by, and it's pretty cool.
I wonder how, I mean, they must be very used to and familiar with people now, but I wonder how domesticated they actually are.
Yeah, I think they are pretty domesticated. I was thinking the same thing. I don't think these guys are coming in and out of Gatorland. I think they live there. They're feeding them and like what you're not supposed to do in the wild and everything.
So Florida, I love it.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. One of the things I also noticed, which was really cool, and this is like a business nerd kind of observation, the lady in the front booth who sold us the tickets, very nice lady. She told us that she was like retired from like Delta Airlines or something like that, and then she was bored, so she wanted to get a job, and she lives around the corner, so she got a job at Gatorland. And she's like telling us about how the guy who owns it now, which is probably a familial person related to the original guy, I would imagine. She starts telling us about how like, yeah, and he just bought the land across the street, and he owns the land all the way down there. And like, it's such a great like group of people. Like she's like really into like Gatorland as like a community and as a culture. And we found that to be the case throughout. It wasn't like it was filled with a bunch of people who were just like like, oh, ho hum, I'm here doing my job.
Yeah.
They had a really good culture. Like it was like, I would say it was akin, if not better, than like a Disney culture. And I know Disney spends tons of time and effort and money making it that good, but this was just like natural, like kind of small business, but like well done small business culture. It was really cool.
I love to hear that. People genuinely in love with the Gator culture. Love it.
They love it. They
Who
love
knew
the Gator
Gator was a culture?
I just love when people find their passions.
Totally.
And if that's, I
Totally.
mean, God bless if that's it. Great. Love it.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, we have our special guest arriving in the room.
Dun,
Did we
dun,
let him in?
dun.
Did you let him in? Here he comes. There he is.
Jonathan Pitts.
Oh, hold on. Technical difficulties.
Unwinding cords, untangling.
So I saw
Love it.
Jonathan Pitts in person a few weeks ago, and it was the first time we'd seen each other in person, probably like in 10 years or more, or maybe not that long, but somewhere around there. And now I'm seeing him again. There he is.
Was this in Chicago?
No, he came down here. He was visiting
Oh.
somebody else, I guess, and then drove over to see us and hung out with us for 24 hours.
Oh, wonderful.
Hello, everybody.
Hello,
There he is.
Jonathan Pitts.
Hi.
Hello.
So I brought my fancy microphone
Nice.
as opposed to my general microphone that I just improv workshop.
There you go.
Fantastic.
So
Because
let me
people-
introduce-
Go
because
ahead.
Jonathan, you don't never met Joey, right? So
No, pleasure to meet you, Jonathan.
Joey, and then Maureen, you've been talking to, but there's Maureen in real life. There we go. Cool, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for jumping on here with us, Jonathan. And it was, like I said, it was good to see you a few weeks back, and it's great to connect with you again without 10 years of gap in between.
Yes. Yeah, 10
So-
years ago, my hair still was like dark. Oh,
Yeah,
it
and
was
I
like,
had a little bit, and I had a little more of it. So,
Yeah. so yeah, 10 years ago, it was like pepper with a little bit of salt. Now it's just all one big salt shaker.
Now all salt. Tell me a
Yeah.
bit about how you guys know each other.
So let me tell that story real quick, Jonathan, because
Sure.
Jonathan is a very special person in my life because he shows up at like important like transitions in life, right? When I was like 19, so that was a lot. I'm going to be 45 in October. So when I was like 19, I started doing the whole improv thing in Chicago, and you know, as an improviser in Chicago, there's definitely a let's call it a hierarchy or something like
Is that a
that.
nice word for it?
Yeah, which I was definitely at the bottom of pretty much the whole time I was there. But Jonathan was one of the guys at the top. And so I always understood and heard of the myth of Jonathan Pitts and like, hey, there's this guy, he runs the Chicago Improv Festival. You know, he's been in the community forever and like all these great things. So I knew of him as like an idea, the idea, like the
concept.
a concept of Jonathan Pitts. And so then when I went to New Mexico and I started Gorilla Tango in New Mexico in Albuquerque, I had a common connection to Jonathan that I didn't even realize, but Jonathan had spent some time in Albuquerque before I had gotten there.
3 years.
Yeah, that's how long I lasted in Albuquerque too, was 3 years.
I lasted 4. But that was that was just cool.
So anyway, so when I opened up Gorilla Tango, or was about to open up Gorilla Tango in Albuquerque, we had set up a message board online for our like internal Albuquerque people and anyone else. I mean, it was public, but it was mostly just the Albuquerque improvisers and whatever. And then Jonathan jumped on there from Chicago and left us a really nice little like note that said like, hey, like, I'm excited that you're doing this. I spent some time in Albuquerque and like, good luck, basically. I don't remember exactly what you wrote. It was something very nice like that he didn't have to do. And of course, I got super excited and motivated because I had this, you know, the legend Jonathan coming and wishing me luck. So I was super excited about that. And then fast forward, like, I think we probably talked on the phone or something at that point. I don't remember. I feel like we connected in some way. I don't think you met us in Albuquerque at that point.
No.
But anyway, like 3 years later, So that was kind of the first transition. And then 3 years later, we moved to Chicago and we opened up Girl Tango in Chicago. And guess who was the first person there to wish us luck there? And like that, there he is. We sat down and we were sitting while it was under construction. And like, I remember Jonathan showed up right away and we sat there and we talked for probably a couple hours, whatever. And then now here he is again. He shows up again as we're going through this like kind of like, you know, branding and marketing and podcast and all this stuff. It's funny how, anyway, I appreciate you, Jonathan, and kind of the impact you've had along the way for me. So thank you for being here. That's a long intro.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. Joey, you said you were at New Mexico for 4 years. Was it New Mexico State University?
No, it was UNM.
UNM.
I grew up in Santa Fe.
Okay.
And went to UNM for undergrad before moving out east.
And what'd you get your degree in?
Acting.
So did you know like Denise Schultz?
Have you ever done Artist Way? The Artist Way, and you have to write a letter to your mentor or somebody that meant the most to you. She's the one who really made me feel like, oh, I can do this. I've got some talent.
Good. Yeah. Back then, I dated a protege of hers who was also from Santa Fe, but I met her because we were in the same improv group.
Your friend, who were you dating?
Her name, my ex-girlfriend, her name is Jennifer Jasper, but she got married to somebody. She got married to a woman and they're living in Vermont. And but Jennifer was like a director in the directing program over at UNM. And Denise Schultz, her mentor, and Jennifer from Santa Fe.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
We all have this New Mexico connection. I love that.
Is Denise Schultz still alive?
She's in Colorado, I believe, living with her daughter or living near her daughter.
Then yes, she is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. So Jonathan, because you and Joey don't know each other, maybe if you want to just give Joey a little, and myself and anyone else who's paying attention to this, just a little quick history on like, I know there's no such thing as a quick history in what you've been involved in, but just kind of set the stage.
Well, may I ask something? Well, let me. It's a little.
Ask away, Joey.
Little thing into this. I read. Correct me if I am wrong. That your father was also an actor.
He was a performer. Well, he was a musical theater major. Went to Northwestern University. Dropped out of that because he was part of a singing trio, and they were making their living at it. So he's like, "Why go to college if I could already make a living?" Eventually, the singing trio broke up, and then he kept performing around in state fairs as a solo singing act. And at one of the state fairs, he came across this one act that had 5 chimpanzees roller skating. And my dad was fascinated by it and thought, I could teach one of them how to ice skate if they already know how to roller skate. So he ended up buying the middle of the 5 chimps, and that chimp's name was Spanky. And back in 1958, he bought Spanky for $5,000, which must have been a hell of a conversation between him and his newlywed wife, my mom.
Yeah, that's a lot of money back then.
Amazing.
Honey, we don't have a lot of money, but I'm going to buy a chimp for $5,000. And that worked out for him. He ended up being part of Ice Capades, and he was one of the featured acts with Ice Capades for 12 years, skating with different chimps. My parents got divorced. My dad moved out to LA with Spanky. My mom moved back to Chicago with me. And then, my dad was the performer for 12 years with Ice Capades, and he was on newspapers and magazines and television. And so was Spanky, of course. He had 4 chimps over the course of his career. Each one performed on stage as the name Spanky, but they had different names off stage. So only the first one was Spanky, and that's the one that I lived with for 2.5 years. Because the first 2.5 years of my life was my mom, me, Spanky, and my father traveling around in a van, around America.
Do you remember much about that time?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh.
I would, the only thing I remember are the stories my mom told me.
Mm.
And also there's no photographs of me with Spanky because photographs were really expensive back then.
Mm.
And there are photographs of Spanky, but they were all promotional photos that Ice Capades paid for. And there is a photo of my mom dressed in a showgirl outfit holding Spanky. So, but again, Ice Capades paid for that, not
Right.
not the Pitts family.
And
So
would
that
you
was-
say that's
ahead.
why the business of show got into your blood? Is that where it started, would you say?
I think that's where it at least showed, or that it was not a crazy idea to pursue. You know, I mean, my father's father was a house painter, so it didn't come from there. My father's mother was a housewife. My mom's mother was also a housewife, and my mom's father was a lawyer and a chemist. So there wasn't anything in that sort of family line until my father went off and became this. But then once it became it was not a crazy idea to go and do something like that. My mom was also a teacher for most of her career. So I sort of feel like in several ways, elements of both of them are in what I do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now all he needs is a chimp.
What else? What else? Well, first question I have about the chimps, real quick. Did the chimps get replaced because they got too old?
Yes.
Is there an age where they have to kind of turn them over? So
Yeah, that's Spanky. The original Spanky lasted the longest because that Spanky really loved performing. I know that a lot of PETA people would say that it's not true, but everything I heard about the original Spanky is that he just truly loved people and he loved performing. I mean, he performed to sold out crowds in the Chicago amphitheater, and the biggest crowd they'd ever performed in front of was at Mets Field, where they performed in front of 23,000 people.
Oh my God.
And so they were, Spanky and my father were doing 8 shows a week for like 8 months a year. So it was like, if Spanky hated it, he would not have.
Right.
On the other hand, Spanky was totally a pro-union chimp in the sense of he would never do anything unless he was fed, and he had to be fed first before he'd do it.
Right.
Same.
Right? Yeah. So whereas the other chimps didn't last as long, because most chimps, once they hit their sort of adolescence, that's when they start expressing their independence, and that's when it became potentially dangerous, and so they would be tired. Whereas Spanky, the original Spanky, stayed the longest, but he eventually was donated to a Philadelphia zoo.
That's awesome. That's cool.
It's funny, once you bring up the chimps, suddenly
know.
I am like the sub character of my own story. Like the chimps just suddenly, Spanky becomes the lead of the picture, and I'm just a guy walking through in the background.
That's hilarious. So let me ask you this: if you didn't weren't in show business, weren't in Chicago improv world and all the things that you've done, what other thing do you think you would have done that was not in the theater or entertainment business?
I had the hardest time making up my mind what I wanted to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. That's why I was a liberal arts major, because that's sort of like a good way to cover until you know. And it was when we performed. I put together a college group here in Chicago at my college, and when we performed at high schools, and then we performed at the end of the semester in front of all of our students. It was an interdisciplinary program, and we performed in front of like a 45-minute show in front of 126 people. And I taught the group, and I took photographs of the group and arranged the set and some of the lighting, and the show went great. And I remember, as everyone else is celebrating, I remember standing on stage at that place, and I thought to myself, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Now, there are, of course, the parts of me that have wondered about if there are parallel universes, what other Jonathan Pittses are doing, which I think is the way of beginning to address your conversation. There's a part of me that probably went into working for ad agencies because I'm verbally good, and the same sort of like picking up something quickly and being able, really good at coming up with taglines, that kind of thing, from doing some producing.
Still creative.
Yeah. There's another part of me that felt that I could have become a therapist or a counselor, because there's a lot of that I end up doing with people. I do not take people into therapy. But a lot of people turn to me for advice or listening. So I want to clarify that. So if anyone's listening, they're not thinking I am just, yeah. But that is a path I could have seen going down. And after I represented myself in a lawsuit versus a theater company, and I won, and I beat a lawyer, a real lawyer, it also occurred to me, oh, I could have seen being a lawyer, because in grammar school, my aptitudes tested that I would be good as a trial lawyer.
Fantastic.
And because my grandfather, who I grew up with, who was also an alcoholic, I avoided all of that because I really combined my grandfather's alcoholism with his lawyer. Because growing up with him, it was never enough to have an opinion. It had to have be a way of proving it 3 different ways.
Right.
You know, when you just want to say Ernie Banks is a great baseball player for the Chicago Cubs as a kid, and you got to, but all of a sudden, representing myself in that court case and kicking butt.
Yeah.
I did such a good job that the lawyer walked out of the courtroom. He was so embarrassed and he just left. Now it's small claims court, so there really wasn't going to be much, you know, but he left.
Right.
I just looked at the judge, and judge said, "No, don't think you've won." And I did win, but you know, but it was like in that moment, ooh, this was fun. So that's another, you know, so that's like another path that I could see myself down. Prior to that moment on stage, I was thinking about social work. I was also thinking about teaching because of my mom. So those are all sort of some of the different possibilities. As a kid, I wanted to either be a fireman or a center fielder for the Chicago Cubs. So
it sounds like, though, aside from the fireman and the center fielder, a lot of your interests sort of are enhanced by what you decided to do.
Yes.
They're all encapsulated there.
I even at one point, you know, in high school, I also did a lot of photography, and my photographs were in the school newspaper and the school yearbook. And then some of them went into like the Oak Leaves, which was the Oak Park, the suburb I grew up in. That was the town paper. So there was another part of me that was drawn to that. And then I started realizing, looking at all those photos, with those photos, I was more interested in telling a story than I was capturing something journalistically. So even then, there was that aspect of like being drawn towards stories and storytelling. I thought about being a writer, but I didn't have enough faith or belief in myself in that way, though I now know I'm actually a really good writer. So I think that you're right, that they're all sort of like different components of the same whole that is part of like the internal part of who I am.
Yeah.
You talk about feeling like you might not have been a good writer that you know you are now. What do you do about imposter syndrome? How have you tackled that?
Oh, that's a great question, Joey. But I didn't feel like it was imposter syndrome. It was that I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't know how to get lessons on how to do it. I feel like imposter syndrome is when you've had some experience at something and then you go, oh, I don't belong here. If all of a sudden I'm at the Iowa's writers retreat, which is like a famous retreat, and I'm all of a sudden like, how did I get here? I shouldn't be here. But it was just a matter of like, I didn't know anybody that was doing any kind of writing that wasn't like for, you know, the school newspaper or anything. So I didn't, you know, really know how, and it was all journalism. And the things that I would write for them looked more like Rolling Stone type profile articles than like who, what, where, this is the you know, so it was more that I didn't know how to go about it. And I didn't know anyone that did it. And I didn't know who to ask. And Google didn't exist then. You know, and YouTube didn't exist then. And Stephen King's book on writing, which for me is one of the 2 best, didn't exist then. My other book that I love about writing is called Wild Mind. And it's by this one woman who's, I'm blanking on her name. She also wrote a book called Writing Down the Bones.
Yes.
Yeah. If you know writing, you know her.
Yeah.
And what I remember about Wild Mind, the first instruction that she had in like the first chapter, she said, write about what hurts. And then I just read that and I wrote for about an hour and a half.
Natalie Goldberg.
Natalie Goldberg, yes. My brain was saying Natalie Merchant, and I'm like, that's not right.
Close, so close.
Yeah.
But that's right. We don't talk enough about what pains us, what hurts us, but that's universal. That's something that connects us all. And I think it's just something we can all, that it just connects us all.
Yes. As the Buddha famously said, life is suffering.
Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell said the same thing, but in a nicer way.
A little more eloquently.
Yeah, that was better for like Californians.
So Jonathan, tell us a little bit about your journey with like the Chicago Improv Festival, I think, and then how that, I mean, and all your other improv kind of endeavors as well. But I think the Chicago Improv Festival is a big part of your life, I think, of your story.
I think of it as the second act of my life.
Okay.
You know,
We need to
everything.
We need to back up and talk about the first act first.
Yeah, because the first act was me putting to, starting to take improv classes. I studied for 5 years in Chicago with everybody that I could, anyone who was around. I dropped out of being a liberal arts major because I had a chance to study with the people that made Second City, the pioneers of this work. And, when I convinced my mom, it was like, look, it's cheaper than sending me to college. And it was a chance to study with all the pioneers of modern improvisation. And in my 5th year, I also ran lights for a place called the Improv Institute. I did that for a year. That was the first fully improvised theater that opened outside of Second City in Chicago, historically speaking. And then after that, I moved off to New Mexico for 3 years to be with my girlfriend, who was from Santa Fe. And within 6 months, the improv group I put together had its first show. And then in the next 2.5 years, we did 250 shows in that 2.5 years. The woman that I dated moved out there to be with. She and I broke up with, but she met the man who was the father of her children in the same improv group. And then I met the other woman from, who was also from Santa Fe, and dated her. But those years in New Mexico, those first 5 years in Chicago is where I got my training. I learned how to make the moments happen on stage. But when I moved to New Mexico, I learned how to make the stage happen. And so it's where I made my bones. The guy who co-produced the festival, the guy I co-produced the improv group with, he was a Buddhist, and also his wife was a public relations person. And so I started learning about PR from her, about how to promote the improv group, and then, Brett's philosophy of Buddhism influenced some of all of us. And then he moved away to go be on a mountain. And then, but I learned a lot from his wife, and I learned how to be able to make pitches to, New Mexico radio, television, newspapers. We were like the full page of the arts section one time, in color, and we were on almost every local TV show. I used to appear once a week on a friend's local radio station. So that group got really big really quickly, because it was like at the time, it was the first ensemble group in New Mexico, because most of Albuquerque was community theater. So there had not yet been a ensemble like a Steppenwolf theater in Chicago, or type of ensemble. And it was also like the first real improv group. There'd been a guy there before, but he was like the music man, scamming in, scamming out. So it was like the first real improv group. And then also there's when I took my first ever acting lesson, and Denise Schultz was my acting teacher. It was also where
Learned from the best,
right? She's about 4'5" and red hair, and just all like
smoked a ton of cigarettes, those little cigarettes. Yeah.
I mean, she's not actually 4'5". She's taller than that, but she was just like a dynamo, small dynamo. And it was amazing to me when she taught, because it was like, I saw that it was difficult for other people sometimes, but it was like, what she's saying makes so much sense. It's so clear. And then when the semester was over, I was like, can I take this again? I just want to stay here and just keep doing this. It's also where I learned, I did theater arts management class, and a lot of what I learned out of that, I used for the rest of my life as a theater producer, and still use, including the sort of magic formulas as to how to budget for things. So that was, those are the kind of things that when you learn those things, it goes from vagueness to clarity.
Fascinating.
And then once you start learning that stuff, it's easier to begin operating from it. So for me, that's where I made my bones. And then, the group broke up. Well, most of the group moved to Seattle and I moved back to Chicago. And then I did improv. The last improv group that I was in was called Sybil's Playhouse. And me and a friend put it together, and we divided up the group as to who could be in it and he wanted the group to be small because at the time the average improv group in Chicago was like 8 people, 7 men, 1 woman, and because it was very IO-centric. And so when we got down to negotiating about who we wanted or not wanted, there was somebody that I wanted that he didn't want. And I'm not saying that guy would have joined us, but I had done workshops with him at Second City and I got along really well with him. So I wanted him to be in it. And that was Stephen Colbert.
Oh my.
So clearly I was right.
I think you were correct.
I was correct on that argument. There's no way that Stephen would remember me or anything like that. But yeah, I was right.
You had an eye. You had an eye for the talent.
Yeah. And so a lot of that was still with that first year. Oh, by the way, in that group though was Amy Sedaris, if you know who she is. Amy Sedaris was in the group, and we almost had Stephen Colbert if my friend had gone along with it. So then I started going through. I did that. That was the last improv group I did for a while. I started going into therapy because what I often, and I learned a lot about being in therapy. I also learned a lot about being in 12-step recovery groups because of the alcoholism in my family. I'm not an alcoholic, but growing up in an alcoholic home had certain effects. So I still go to 12-step groups now as a sort of maintenance or tune-up. But what I like to point out is that improv taught me that it was okay to play as an adult.
Right.
And therapy taught me that it was okay to be alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like I need 2 minutes to just think about that.
You have the rest of your life to think about.
Wow. I love that.
And then when I know I'm still in the first chapter and not getting close to CIF. My apologies. Because Joey's interesting. I also like to say, I had a therapist who said to me, "Can you give up theater if it means being happy?"
Oh.
And that was a hell of a question that thunderstruck me. And I did not do theater for 2 years and just really did all kinds of inner work.
Now explain to me, okay, because I struggle with this as well as a theater artist. So theater was giving you a great deal of joy, and then it suddenly wasn't. Then it was suddenly making you frustrated, unhappy.
There's limits as to what theater can give you. Even if you're on Broadway working 8 shows a week,
Sure.
you'll have at least 12 hours a day when you're not doing the work.
And when would you say you realized, oh, this isn't fulfilling me the way I thought it was going to? Or was it more gradual?
No, it was definitely, it was around the time, and it started in New Mexico. I first went to my first adult Children of Alcoholics meeting in Albuquerque, New Mexico, because I heard a radio report on National Public Radio, and they talked about it as a group. And then I went to that group meeting in Albuquerque, and they had like 12 characteristics of adult Children of Alcoholic, and I had all 12. 100%, all of them. And so, you may travel around the world, but you also bring your problems with you. You can't create a geographical cure. The cure is on the inside, not the outside. And after having some success with Sybil's Playhouse, which was the group that I did post Albuquerque, I just became aware that things weren't working, and I needed to keep, going further from the 12-step programs. 12-step programs can only do so much for you. Therapy does. It's almost like CrossFit of training. You need different ways of working on yourself and so that's when I became aware that I needed to start working on my alcoholic family issues with the therapist rather than a group where you take turns. And And once that therapist said that, I didn't have an answer for that. So I just stopped for a while. But again, after those 2 years, I went back into theater. And one of the biggest things that I discovered is that in some ways, unconsciously, I was looking at the audience to fulfill my need or desire to be recognized by my father.
Mm.
And nobody in any of those audiences paid for that. It wasn't like I had a sign outside the show saying, "Want to be my father? Show up, $5. This show's for you." And because there's that thing of when you have a great show, you're so jazzed up, you're awake till 2 a.m.
Yeah.
That's right.
And there's the thing that if you have a bad show, you're awake to 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And all of that is energy not from the right place, not being used in the right way, and not being let go of. And so therapy helped me a lot with that. So I remember the next time I started performing, I was like, wow, I have to have a completely different relationship with the audience than I have before, because I'm now consciously different. And and my first shows, I was rusty as all hell, and not that good, but then I just kept getting better and better again. And my relationship to audiences now is that I think of them. I don't seek their affirmation, I affirm them.
Oh, lovely.
I am taking them on a ride.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one going on the roller coaster of being like a Sherpa guide. They're the ones going along, and they get to have their experience and I get to have mine.
Oh, what a fantastic way to look at it. A lot healthier
Yes. Yeah.
way to look at it.
And then I do a ritual before I do a workshop or a show to sort of bring forth the higher, better part of me. And then afterwards to release it so that I can just go back to being Jonathan, the guy who does dishes.
And you can go to sleep before 2 a.m.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so a lot of that was work that was really important to do. And then, this is all still part of chapter 1. I went and in 1990, I was a production intern for the International Theater Festival of Chicago. And it was the first time I ever dealt with festivals or experienced it. I became the production intern because even though I could have applied for like the marketing intern, I felt like production is what I didn't know. Doing mainly improvisation, things with tools and, lights and sounds and installing things and lifting things were something I didn't know a lot about. So I wanted to know that. And I did that. And it was fortunate because that year was amazing. The people that I worked with makes it sound like I was on stage with them. But one of the companies that was there was Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson when they were still married. And they were put up 2 Shakespeare shows, including Emma Thompson as the fool in King Lear.
Oh my God.
And I watched them and I was like, Kenneth Branagh is the more famous one, but Emma's the more talented one.
Right.
Yeah. And, I'd had experiences where I got to play softball with them, the International Theater Festival of Chicago staff. Kenneth Branagh and I were opposite shortstops. Emma Thompson was on my team. My hair was down to the middle of my back then, and it was wavy and curly. And on their last night of their show, Emma came up, touched my hair, and said, "You have great hair." I also worked with. I know, right? I worked with a guy. There's one of my 10 all-time favorite shows is called The Dragons Trilogy, and it was by Robert Lepage out of Montreal. And it was like a 6-hour show that had been developed over time through improvisation and creativity and intuition. And watching them work and see what they did just made me feel like, oh, I can see where you can go even beyond Dell's work at the Herald. This is like this whole other thing that's like, it was like looking at someone's doctorate thesis. And I got to meet them. I got to work with them. I even there was a group from Mexico doing a show about their lottery, and it was my job to oversee the care of the chickens that they used for the show. So there's so many things I got to experience. I fell in love with festivals, and I fell in love with international work, seeing international artists, seeing people from around the world, seeing the many ways that there are to create theater or to create any type of process. So that was the first act of my life, doing all of that. And then I also created a thing called Kids' Rights, where we were performing works written by
Oh, I think your microphone is cut out just a bit, Jonathan.
Say something again.
No, still cut
No.
out. So sorry. Still out. Still out.
Yeah.
I think perhaps your microphone has lost its mojo.
That's what it sounds like. No.
Yeah. Still out.
Yeah, switch to those. That's a good idea. It was weird because it was like working fine, and then all of a sudden it was just like,
Oh, sure. I don't know if those things run on battery or I don't know.
right. Yeah, I don't know either.
It was
My buddy Noah.
strange. Suddenly sounded like tin.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like one time when, well, you both, Maureen for sure experienced it. Remember my chipmunk microphone noise that it would make, the chipmunk noise, right? No, did you never experience that? When I would pop on in the morning to our meetings, and then I would sound like Elvin and the Chipmunks.
Yes, just
No?
at the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Joey, you never experienced that, right?
No.
I had this old like,
Fantastic.
Logitech webcam that I had forever, and I used it for way longer than I probably should have because it was like a $30 camera that I just never upgraded and changed computers and stuff. And then and then for some reason it would just like in the morning when it turns on it would be happening, like it wasn't always, it would just be like random, and it would sound literally like Alvin and the Chipmunks. Like it would have like the little like, oh man, yeah, like if you can imagine how that sounded. And that's how I would sound when I would come on. They couldn't quite understand what I was saying, but it would sound like that. And then there were a couple meetings where it was like kind of like, you know, if it's just like an internal meeting, who cares? But like when it was an external one, it was like
Right.
kind of like don't really want to come on and be like, you know.
Right. Sort of like the client that, you know, kept showing up like a cat
Yes, exactly.
on the Zoom. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if the microphone went bad or if it was because it lost the connection, because I ended up losing connection, but I've got the more stable mic on as opposed to the fancy mic. So I was doing this thing called Kids' Rights, and so I was, you know, where we would work with children around the city of Chicago and work with different populations and work with children with different disabilities, and each time we would take their writings and then perform them on stage. And that eventually led to me working for a thing called Magic City, which was a festival that Mayor Daley's wife put together. And it was while I was working at that is when I met a woman named Frances Callier, who was helping run things at Second City. And then one day after I left one of our days at Magic City, I walked outside and I was like, how come Chicago does not have an improv festival? That made no sense to me, because at the time, Austin, Texas had the largest improv festival in the United States. It was called Big Stinking Improv.
But
Fest.
Chicago's always been the hub, wouldn't you say?
Yes, that's why I was really perplexed as to why there was not an improv festival.
Yeah.
So I gave Frances a call. You know, I didn't wait to see her the next day at work. I gave her a call and said, I want to put together an improv festival in Chicago. And she said, yes, I've been wanting to do this for years, but no one would do it with me. So then that's when we formed our partnership. We created the business as an LLC, and then planned on it for like 6 to 9 months and did the first one and began from there. So to me, the Chicago Improv Festival is the second act. I always say that if I had not done everything I did in the first act, including all the things that I learned in New Mexico, both on stage and off, if I did not do the inner work that I did, I would not have been ready to be in one of the people in charge of the Chicago Improv Festival, and I would not have been ready to be able to run it like I did for 20 years.
Yeah. What year was that when you first started? What was the first year?
The first year was, I get confused because it's either 97 or 98. because one of those years, Francis and I were meeting a lot, and then the next year, we did it. We created a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, and a 5-year plan. We created an exit strategy if it made a lot of money, and an exit strategy if it made no money. Francis's ultimate goal was for it to make TV shows out of it, because that's what the U.S. Comedy Arts Festival was doing at the time. And for me, I was looking at it more from like a not-for-profit point of view. And what we agreed upon was that the festival was going to be created for the development of audiences. We had like 2 main goals. Like TV, if it could happen, great, but that's harder. That's not in your hands. You need somebody else to do that to you. Our 2 main goals with the Chicago Improv Festival was 1, audience development, make the audiences for improvisation better, and 2, show that it's an art form. Because back then, there was still that ongoing conversation as to whether or not it is or isn't.
Everybody knew whose line is it anyway, and that was it, right? Like that was the broader, short form, not all the variety that you really get. Yeah.
And so that was our goal, to show that it was an art form, especially because in Chicago, it still wasn't necessarily seen as such. And so we felt like through a festival like the Chicago Jazz Fest, the Chicago Blues Fest, Chicago Gospel Fest, Chicago's the city of festivals. We have a lot of festivals here. And, like those other festivals run by the city, within a matter of years, we realized that, and I realized that a lot of people would come to our festival and then maybe go see some other groups or see some of the groups that performed or go to the theaters. So it's because we had this promise. You're not going to see the average show. You're going to see the best and the brightest, the finest. You're going to see excellence. You're not just going to see a normal Wednesday night. And so, but yes, that was Act 2. And I ran that for 2 years. And then I also created other festivals. I created a college improv tournament that was both in America and Canada. I created a teen comedy fest, the Chicago Podcast Festival. I did education outreach shows that I created that we did in the Chicago area. And then after 20 years, I was like, I'm done. I've served my time. I've put in my 20 years. I'm done. And I stopped producing the Chicago Improv Festival. And then I stuck around for a couple more years as the executive director of Chicago Improv Productions, and then turned everything else over to other people. And in the fall of 2017, I started teaching and performing around the world in a process that I refer to as my global improv walkabout. So for me, that's Act 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wait, let me ask you a question about Act 2 real quick.
Sure, of course. I know that, I didn't go
I
further on Act 2 because I knew you'd have more questions about it, because I knew that's the main thing you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, no, there was no main thing. We're just kind of talking through your journey. So Act 2, the Chicago Improv Festival, I can speak to my experience with it because I kind of got into the Chicago improv community like in '99. So I guess that would have been like 2-3 years in for you as far as the improv festival goes. And so by the time I was probably really aware of it, it would have been more like 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. So 4 or 5 years in. So I can speak to like the buzz and the impact. Did you feel that it was like an immediate, like, hey, you got something immediately, or was there a ramp up from, how did you feel in terms of like really penetrating the community and like getting into it?
On opening night of the very first year, we were at the Annoyance Theater back when it was on Clark Street. And that's when the Annoyance Theater was sort of set up like a clubhouse. And they had a capacity for about 200 people. What I had done in the week that we had rented the Annoyance Theater, I brought in pipes and drape and fancy looking chairs, and it became a theater of 300 seats. And then with their balcony, they had room for more. So our opening night, the headliners were Upright Citizens Brigade, the main 4 people, including Amy Poehler. And it was Francis who got that gig because I didn't know any of them. So that was all Francis. But on opening night, on a Wednesday night, I believe was our opening night, but it could have been Tuesday. But, I had the Improv Institute put together a reunion show because I wanted to honor that they were the first theater to ever do full improv in Chicago before everyone else did. So I wanted them to be seen and to open the festival. And then UCB was the headliners. And that was just when they'd gotten their U.S. Comedy Arts Festival award and were about to go start taping their first season at Comedy Central, and they're all living in New York. And that night, I believe it was a Wednesday, on that night, on a Wednesday, we had 340 people in the room. More people than fit on Second City's main stage.
Wow.
And that was our opening night.
Wow.
Yeah. So you felt like you were on the right track at that point.
Yes. Yeah. Like, you know, there was the rest of the festival was good. You know, we didn't have anything as big as that opening show. And in fact, I remember there were some complaints that what we did wasn't big enough, but Francis and I had a philosophy, which is like, let's build the boat first, see if it floats, find out where the problems are, and then make it bigger in year two.
Right. Did you I mean, look, this, what you're describing is any entrepreneurial journey, right? Any business, you started a business basically, right?
Yeah.
And so, you had your audience, you had your product. What do you think was kind of like the hardest thing you had to do in that process of either over the whole 20 years, like a recurring issue that was like never really resolved, or something you did resolve, whatever, what was hard from like a entrepreneurial business perspective?
From the beginning, in that first year, the biggest thing was convincing all the major players that we were going to be there and that we were going to do this and that it was going to be okay and that we were going to make room for them.
You're talking major players like the brand names.
Second City, Annoyance Theater, Comedy Sports, IO with Sharna, and back then the Free Associates were a big deal. So
Okay.
I started to realize that probably part of the reason why there'd never been an improv festival before in Chicago before me and Francis putting it together was because it was like in New York, there were 5 mafia families and they had each carved out their business, you know, and several of them were making, you know, certainly IO at the time and Second City were making millions of dollars a year. And so, you know, it took them long enough to reach sort of a detente amongst themselves that they were not, you know, to then come in and say, hey, we're going to do this festival. I don't think anyone else could have done it and then gotten fuller support from the other 4 families.
Right.
I mean, maybe, but it didn't happen.
It's quite a coup. It sounds like quite a coup to have done that.
Right.
It sounds like it was very exclusive for a while, all of the different mafia factions.
Yeah, because you know, they had a lot to protect, you know, and I had meetings with everybody to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we wanted to do. For some of the people in the improv community, I've been gone from the improv community for so long, they didn't know who I was or what I'd done. So, you know, and so it was a matter of convincing them on that. So, you know, in some of those meetings, Francis would be more the alpha because they knew her and I would be the beta because, you know, they were just getting to know me as opposed to, because the people that knew me from before, I'd been, you know, out of that realm for like 10 years in the Chicago realm. So, and 10 years in improv time is like 4 or 5 generations. And so, people that, you know, so a lot of that was in those early days, explaining the concept, asking how we want them to get involved, asking, you know, to let them know we're not trying to take over anything. But in essence, we are Sweden. We're going in with a flag of neutrality. We support everyone. We accept everyone. We support all the different styles of improvisation, support all the different ways of working together. And then, you know, the first thing was to win over the people who owned and ran those theaters.
Yeah. And it had to be that way. It had to be a neutral third party, because if any one of them decided to do something like that, no one would have jumped on board, right? You had to have that central, for lack of a better word, disinterested third party to come in and put something like that together that they can all choose to join, as opposed to say, you know, if Second City decided, hey, we're going to do this, everyone else is going to be like, well, no, screw you. We're not, like, we don't want to get on your boat, right? So like, that makes sense. That's interesting. I noticed something like that too when I was in New Mexico. When I was doing improv in New Mexico versus improv, and this is much smaller scale, of course, but just as a performer or putting teams together or whatever in Chicago versus New Mexico, Albuquerque, because we didn't have the, like in Chicago, the improv community, there's a supportive aspect, but then there's also the like, hey, we're all trying to get somewhere kind of culture, right? So there was always that underlying like, hey, we're here to support each other, we're here to do good improv, okay, fine. But like I said, that hierarchy at the beginning of this conversation, where in New Mexico, we didn't have that at all because no one was going anywhere. Like we were just having fun and doing art and whatever. And so having that freedom to get away from that competitiveness and away from that kind of like culture of like, hey, what's next? That produced a lot of good. I personally did, and I think Kelly would agree for her too. And like whatever, we did our best improv. Well, maybe not for her because she's a better improviser. She did plenty of good improv in Chicago too. But I did my best improv in New Mexico because of that, because it was just like fun and free and awesome. So you do definitely need to have that kind of like breakdown of that competitiveness and hierarchy and all those things that kind of get baked in that sometimes screw with people's ability to work together, I think.
I agree with you on that. And also looking at it from an entrepreneur point of view, a couple other things is the people, when we met with them, they wanted to make sure that we weren't looking to them to run our business for us, that we weren't, and at the same time, they weren't looking to be excluded from it either. So I came up with the idea of having an advisory board. And that's when, Francis and I asked everybody that was in a high position in Chicago improvisation to be on our advisory board.
Smart.
And of course, every question they had with the advisory board is, how often do we meet? And we would say,
and at what time?
Yes. And our answer was never. We will never meet. It just is, if you have something you want to give us advice about, you have a direct pipeline to us. And if occasionally we have an issue or an idea or a thought or something we might need some clarity on, we can reach out to you. But otherwise, and then we'll promote that, you are on the advisory board of this. And then that's how we had several people from Second City, Sharna from IO, and Mick from Annoyance, and, a bunch of other people like that, and people who were not even necessarily known to the general public, but were known in the community. People like Sheldon Patinkin, who ran the theater department at Columbia College Chicago, was on our advisory board. Just as many people as we could to sort of honor everybody that was important to this work, because the improvisational theater had been around 40 years in Chicago before our first Chicago Improv Festival show. So there was like a lot to honor, and in fact, our official, even though we had the internal idea being our two goals are to raise audience awareness and, develop as an audience, it's for the audience, and then to show that this is an art form. I wrote the mission statement of the Chicago Improv Festival, which was, and hopefully I can remember this because I haven't said it in a while, to honor the past, to showcase the future, and to celebrate the present of improvisation in all its many multiple disciplinary expressions from a regional, national, and international focus.
Damn.
Yep. And that's what it was. You lived up to it.
Yeah. And that's also why I feel like if you're an entrepreneur, one of the things I think is just really important is, one, you got to be aware of your vision. Two, you got to clarify your vision. Three, you have to speak your vision into existence. Come up with a mission statement like that. Now that was too long of a mission statement for when I'd be on TV or radio. So the fast version was to honor the past, celebrate the present, and showcase the future. Because that's like one sentence that could be said, when you're on TV or on radio. Oh, what are you doing at the festival? Well, we're honoring the past, celebrating the present, showcasing the future. And they're like, oh, great, because you actually hear the inherent timeline in it. So to me, that's part of it. If you're an entrepreneur, is being able to speak it into existence. I mean, just even hearing Dan say after he heard the full mission statement, Dan went, and that's what it was. And he's right.
Yep.
That's what it was.
Yep. That's what it was.
That's what it was.
I think that's absolutely true in a mission when you're building a business or you're building whatever it is you're building or an organization of any kind. I think also people can do that for themselves, even on a personal level, right? If they've got a vision for themselves or something they're trying to accomplish, it's good to have that. You know, I think in a personal setting, it's like you might call it a mantra or a just again something that's like that North Star to kind of lead yourself towards. I think a lot of times people as individuals get distracted by all the day-to-day oddball things, and they don't have that little thing that they can kind of like keep setting their, you know, direction to. And that,
Right.
you know, I think it makes a big difference.
Unless they've spent time living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or somewhere in New Mexico, then they probably dropped acid somewhere
Right.
and gone like on their own inner journey. Yes, they are. Burning Man is over. They're still there.
They're still there in the mud. So Jonathan, what made you decide on Act 3? What made you decide to leave the
Yeah.
festival when you did?
Well, literally, it was. I was ready to go at year 19, but that was a weird year to leave on
Right.
because you're so close to 20.
Right.
Like if you leave on year 19, it's gonna easily feed into what happened.
Sure.
It's 19, but you know, so year 20, I'm like, this is my last year. I told the board of directors it was my last year. And back when we used to put up press releases for the festival, I knew we had to have an A story, a B story, and a C story every year of the festival, so that I knew what's our main storylines for that year's festival. And for me, the 20th year, the A storyline was Chicago Improv Festival was having its 20th year. The B storyline was that I was leaving. And it might have even been the C story. I forgot what the B storyline was. Me announcing it was my last year bumped up me as a C storyline to a B storyline really fast. But for me, it was because I was done. I was literally done. I had made my contribution. I had done what I was supposed to do. You know, in many ways, running the festival was a burden because of how much work it took.
Yeah.
Every year it took anywhere between 6 to 8 months to work on that festival. I never performed in the Chicago Improv Festival because I didn't want to be on stage somewhere and have something go wrong somewhere else and not be available as the producer or executive producer to be able to jump in and put out a fire if there was one. And I just, after 20 years, I was done. Much like when you hear somebody saying, I policeman for 20, or I delivered mail for 20 years, or I did this, I was done. I was done.
So it was a bit of burnout, a little bit of burnout.
Oh, it was beyond burnout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Burnout is I feel like when you're burned out, there's still some embers, but it was like, this is finished for me. And, you know, I feel like in life, the two of the hardest things to learn is one, to let in, and two, to let go.
That's something a lot of us don't learn, is the letting go part.
Yes. And yet I feel, I say this in improv classes, and yet every time you breathe, you are already learning that lesson. With every breath you let in and you let go. So we're constantly being reminded how to do it. We just, in our brains, forget about it. So it was time to let go. And once those 20 years were over, I was like, this is done. There was no feeling of like, oh, I wish I'd gone back, because I didn't want to be Queen Elizabeth. I didn't want to be like staying there so long that people, you know, running the Chicago Improv Festival, that people were wishing I'd die already. I just sort of like, let this go, let somebody else do whatever they're going to do. So I did. And then the reason why I started doing what I did that became Act 3 was because I realized I was in a transition. I don't like transitions. My metaphor of a transition is like walking through a house with all the lights out and you can't see where you're going and you don't know where you are and you don't know if you're going to get there. And it takes forever. Transitions suck.
Mhm.
I love transformation.
Mm.
Transformation requires everything from me. All my mental, emotional, spiritual focus, energy happens in a transformation. It doesn't happen in a transition.
So did you already
Right.
feel that you were transforming, or did you go through that tricky the
I was in a
transition?
transition for a while and
Yeah.
I just like, oh, this sucks. And so I was like, I know, I'll go on a walkabout. When you don't know, because like taking the lesson from, the Aboriginals out of Australia, when you don't know what to do, go on a walkabout.
Right.
When you're ready to find something new, go on a walkabout. Are you bored? Go on a walkabout. So I was like, I'll go on a walkabout. And then the walkabout became its own transformation.
Mm.
And I was no longer in that awful place of transition. When I left Albuquerque, New Mexico, I was like, what if this is it? What if these 250 shows with this group called Phantasmagoria Improvisational Theater, what if this was the peak?
Mm.
What if I'm 28 years old and this is done?
Did you really believe that, or did you think that really ran through your head?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I did other things. There's a lot of things that I've created that have gotten attention in the press and media. So that's always been helpful to be able to go, oh, look at those things. Those are all like affirmations that, what I'm doing works. At the end of the Chicago, then at some point during the Chicago Improv Festival, it so superseded what I did with Phantasmagoria. It was the difference between a mountain and a hill.
Sure.
Right.
And the work that I was doing, being the producer of the Chicago Improv Festival, was literally connecting with improvisers all over the United States as well as all over the world. In the 20 years of the Chicago Improv Festival, we had live performances in Chicago from improvisers from 28 countries. The Chicago Improv Festival had over 225 acts performing in 20 venues over the course of 1 week.
Yeah. And to your point about how the next act, it kind of builds off of everything you had from the last act. I imagine, I'm guessing, you're probably going to verify now, that a lot of your international walkabout came from those connections and those relationships that you developed over those 20 years.
Absolutely. Right? Every year I would have international improvisers stay at my apartment where I lived in Wicker Park. And so a lot of those people I've now gone to their country or their city and, done workshops and teach and perform with them. And then once I'm out there, I meet other people that then invite me to do other things as well. And it just grows from there. I would also want to say that it wasn't that I didn't make mistakes during those 20 years of Chicago Improv Festival. I did make mistakes. But I would say for the decisions that I made, they were right probably 3 out of 4 times, which is enough to, like in baseball, put you in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I did. Running an improv festival is a tough business because it's the slowest experiment in the world.
Right.
You do it for a week, you see what worked, you see what didn't work, and you can't do anything about it for another year.
Wow. Yeah. Right.
Whereas like you're running a theater, a company, and you have like a regular run of 5 shows, you can, if something goes funky with the box office, you fix it for the very next run, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So the other thing I want to let entrepreneurs know is that it's okay to make mistakes because I firmly believe you build upon your successes, but you learn from your mistakes. And I feel a lot of America tries to do the opposite, but you learn from your mistakes. You don't learn from your successes. And can tell you, and probably Joey, you from your performing experience, there's times you have an amazing show and you have no idea why it was so great.
Yep.
It just was. You can't learn from that because you don't know what you did. Whereas the mistakes that you make, you can learn from that. You can build from the successes because it gives you confidence. One thing that I don't believe any improv or theater teacher can teach is confidence, because I think confidence is a gift that you can only give yourself.
Right.
And before you have confidence, you have to have comfortability. And before you have comfortability, you have to have reps. And the more reps you do, the more comfortable you get. The more comfortable you are, the more confident you can be going into any situation. For example, I performed back in 2019 at the Krakow Improv Festival with Dave Rosowski, and they set us up to be the Saturday night 8 o'clock headliners.
Oh my God.
And
I'm anxious for you.
And I had never even performed with Dave Rosowski before. I know Dave because I presented him at the Chicago Improv Festival, and he's one of our, we later had an artistic board, and he was on our artistic board, which is different than our advisory board. And we had artistic associates, but we never performed together. And that night we performed in front of 600 people. And I did not feel any nervousness other than appropriate nervousness that was actually excitement.
Right.
And they did the same sort of thing. I looked at that audience and I was like, it's not your job to affirm me. I affirm you. You are the audience, and I'm going to take you on a journey. And then we went and did what we did. And later, a friend of mine, an improv friend of mine who was from London, said it was like watching two heavyweights in the same ring. Just go, and I was like, yeah. So
was that filmed by any chance?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where might one be able to find that?
Wherever the Krakow Improv Festival is.
I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, Krakow Improv Festival 2019.
2019.
And it would be Dave Rosowski and Jonathan Pitts, because it was no funky name, it was just us. So that doesn't happen if I don't have the other things that have happened. If I don't, all of those things, reps leading to comfortability, leading to confidence, because I felt confident going into that show. I had no imposter syndrome. I'm like, I belong here.
Right.
This is going to be fun. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And, but also learning from mistakes as I go. So that's,
I think part of learning from mistakes is learning that you can recover from mistakes. I think when people get freaked out is that they're afraid if they make a mistake, they're so afraid of failure. And honestly, it's the failures, like you're saying, you learn from. So you just got to get used to the idea that like, oh, I'm going to learn from that. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, right? Like that's the basis.
And also remembering that just because something ends doesn't mean that it wasn't good.
Right. That's the difference between British sitcoms and American sitcoms. British sitcoms usually have a lifespan. They're usually relatively short. They're good. They end and they're awesome. American sitcoms have a tendency to
jump the shark,
run till they die.
And knowing that something ended but it's still good is part of letting go, which makes space for letting in something new. And and I would also say to certain entrepreneurs, you may fall in love with your project, you may create that business, and don't be surprised if like 10 years later you're like, okay, I'm ready for something else. That doesn't mean that this wasn't worth it. It just means you're ready for something else, and you're going to have to let go to go on. I mean, I look at all the different sort of side hustles that Dan has run.
I know.
It's
very impressive.
Right? Some of which have worked and some of which haven't. But the ones that haven't worked taught him something else. Like, don't do big hot dogs.
Big hot dog worked as well as it worked for as long as it worked.
See, that's exactly right. That's the way you have to take it. And actually, thinking about it, Chicago loves its hot dogs. It would be like it's not like he was in Chattanooga, Tennessee and thought this would work. Chicago loves its hot dogs here. So it's sort of in the culture that he was influenced by that.
And you know what else? The guy who I made the big hot dog with, Kurt Schmeiser, who lived in Chicago and was, as he says, was born into the sausage and hot dog business. He now lives like 20 minutes from me, coincidentally down here. And we see each other quite often, actually. And he's like my oldest friend in Florida because he's from Chicago and whatever. So
are you guys going to create a reunion product and do like the world's largest Cubano sandwich?
they just actually we were just featured again in the Guinness book. I don't know if you guys saw the news, But yeah, just again, the Guinness Book put out some sort of like official, like top, held records for the longest time, blah, blah. And I was on there as the big hot dog. So you're right, Jonathan. We probably need to come up with another. We got to top ourselves now as something else.
And the thing is, even though that came to an end, you're still in the Guinness Book of Records. It's not like there's a value to take on. Maybe it's because being in theater, we're used to things opening and closing, that we have a different sense of the rhythms of life than somebody who might be an entrepreneur who feels they need to make the one thing that's going to last them for the next 45 years.
Right.
And then it becomes so easy for them to tie their self-awareness, their self-perception, their self-ego into that product, that it creates problems, as opposed to, what I back in the day when I was running the Chicago Improv Festival, I would only say this to friends, because oftentimes in talking to TV and press, they would be like, "Oh, so the Chicago Improv Festival has really helped make you. You've really come," and I would always speak nicely because it's the press. But to my friends, I'd say, the Chicago Improv Festival didn't make me. I made it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know all the steps that I
You
did.
should own it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I felt
Yeah.
like I was like a made man coming out of New Mexico with all the things I knew, and then applying it further in multiple ways. When I worked for the Around the Coyote Arts Festivals and Theater Performance, that's the first time I started ever running parts of a festival, and I did that for 7 years, and also introduced me to multiple disciplines, which taught me another language. So to me, there were so many steps along the way that I knew that I learned, and none of them were fake. None of them were fraudulent. None of them, there might have been synchronicity that got me into something, but in many times it was me making a door so that I could walk through it.
Yep.
More than somebody saying, something. One person asked me to become the theater curator of the Around the Coyote, and that was probably like the last time somebody gave me something in that way. Everything else has been me pursuing that other route. So and it goes back to, like, improv training teaches us how to make the moment alive on stage, but the other types of training teaches us how to make the stage happen and be alive.
Right.
And so that's why I feel like all of this feels like 3 acts to me, because I can see how each one led to the next one.
Right. Is the third act now, like, do you see that as like your journey now for the or who knows, I suppose, right? Like, I guess you don't know what the 4th act potentially looks like, or
I think
how does
4th
it
act
work?
is death.
That's the 4th act.
I mean, there's not a lot of plays that have 4 acts or 5 acts.
I know, that's why.
So, in fact, I even joke that, like, in America, there are no 3rd acts. That's why my 3rd act is in the rest of the world. Because the rest of the world's used to plays that have 3 acts, but America, 2
Right.
acts. So, I'm doing what I'm doing, traveling around the world. I've been in 28 countries so far. And later this year, I'm going to add on 2 more. I've been booked to go the end of October, first part of November. I'm going to be teaching and performing in Reykjavik, Iceland. So I will be out there for my birthday. And then after that, I'm going to Slovenia. And then while I was in Florida, one of the things I was working at, I got invited to teach at 4 cities in China.
Wow,
So,
cool.
so the part of me is like, I'm doing this until either my knees give out or my hips give out, like, to where it just becomes cumbersome to travel, or until there's another pandemic, or because, I lost 2 years of travel time on that thing, or
Right.
I just reach a point to where I go, I'm done again, whatever it might be.
Right.
It might be that I'm like, oh, this has been fun, but now I just want to stick to the US. Maybe keep traveling at all the different festivals around the US, but not do that extended travel. Or maybe I'll be at a point to go, I'm done.
Right.
And, to listen to either myself or the life in the universe when it presents itself. Earlier this year, I was on the road for 86 days straight.
A lot.
And I was in New Zealand, Australia, India, Japan, Honolulu, and San Diego. So 86 days completely out of Chicago, just working improv nonstop.
That's cool. That's cool. I love it.
Jonathan, I feel like this has been a masterclass. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah,
I'm going
absolutely.
to have to listen to this again myself because I feel like I've just had a lot of it. Have you been drinking milk this entire time?
This is soy milk.
Soy milk. Okay. It's
Yes.
adorable.
And it's got water in there. I cut the soy milk so it's not so soy. So it's like half soy
That's
milk.
so
half water.
soy-y. Fantastic.
So yeah, it's that's that. And the one thing I like to share, one of the biggest things I learned traveling around the world, working with international artists, is that undeclared boundaries are cultural, artistic, and personal assumptions.
Say that one more time, please.
Say that again.
Yeah. Undeclared boundaries are artistic, cultural, and personal assumptions. We bring them to the table, they bring them to the table.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to work together creatively, what is assumed has to be made explicit
Right.
so that you can understand how to work together. Especially because different countries, people have a different educational system, and how they learn is different. And if you come in with just your way of looking at things or thinking of things, you're going to either class or miss.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And if they've had other artistic training, you know, when working with people in India, if they've had Indian acting training, that's a very specific style of acting. And
Right.
so, you know, if I'm going to help work with them, I need to know more about that and not just come in all Mr. Presumption and lay down
That's right.
like, you know, yeah. So that's part of what I learned, is that there are so many different thoughts and concepts, how much eye contact you make, space between people, touching or not touching, you know, and I'm not talking sexual, I just mean even like touching someone on the shoulder. All of those things are different assumptions that people have, different, you know, families in different situations, and influenced by their culture or influenced by their cultural history. You know, when I'm working with improvisers in Poland, they have in their background 2 sets of time periods where they're occupied by other countries, and how that's
Right.
influenced their grandparents and their parents, and how, like a lot of times in Asian countries, because of both imperialism and colonialism, they have such a to be perfect and to find the answer, and to understand that that was because that's the survival that their family needed, because they were never going to be the upper class, but if they were that good, maybe they'd be chosen for the middle class.
Right.
And all of those things get by being able to create improvisationally, where I would
Right.
sometimes say, don't worry about being right, be real.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I'd love to carry that into life. We can all learn from that.
Right?
Right.
So as such, meeting people around the world has definitely taught me that. How many, you know, and I think I first started to get that lesson when I went from a Chicago guy to living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. To go from like a city of 3.5 million that's flatlands, where the only thing we have look like mountains are architecture. We've got this huge lake, to then going in a place that's 5,500 feet above sea level, that has sun 300 days of the year, that has mountains. Like I only one day of the 3 years I lived out there, that I looked outside, I went, no, mountain. Every other time I go, mountains. To see a place with mountains, to see the desert that's out there, to learn about green chili. You know, I joke that in New Mexico, I learned to make peace with pastels and wear pastel colors, because in Chicago, you wear black, gray, and red, because we don't have the same kind of sun. To be able to work with an improv group where at least half the group was LGBTQT, all of that was going on. And there were so many things that were just so different. Like I grew up loving sports and politics because I grew up in Chicago. In New Mexico, no one cares about sports or politics.
Right. Right.
To a fault.
Yeah. But I would say so many more people that I know that grew up in New Mexico had done acid or mushrooms multiple times before they were 18 years old, compared to people that I knew in Chicago. So I was already learning then The only difference is that now I'm a joyful learner of that. Back then I was like an learner about it. I didn't, why is this not like Chicago? And
Yeah.
back
Right.
then the Albuquerque had like 2 blocks that looked like the city.
Right.
And
Yep.
now it's expanded. Last time I was there, it's much larger and all of that. But you don't have to go very far before all of a sudden you're in the University of New Mexico and you're in the the student ghetto.
Student ghetto. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
and you're walking around alleys that are made of dirt, which is just so that's part of what I learned there. And along the way, working with international theater people, I learned it more joyfully than I first learned it initially, because I had to shake off a lot those 3 years.
Sure.
When I left New Mexico, I took a rock from the Sandia Crest Mountains with me, and I left something of myself there that I buried into the mountains. So it was like a trade. That way, part of New Mexico would always be with me, and part of me would always be in New Mexico. But only a part, because, as you said, 3 years can be enough.
Yeah.
That was part of it. Traveling around the world is being able to learn that lesson. And
Right.
the other thing is to remember, if you travel around the world, prepare to get lost. Prepare that everything's going to take longer. When I'm in another country, the easiest part of my day is doing improv.
Mhm.
Every country has its own system for public transportation that makes sense to them, but doesn't make sense. Every country has so many different ways of designing handles and water faucets and ways of opening windows and doors. I've learned to become so much more empathetic or compassionate for people when I see them in Chicago and they're from another country and they look lost. Because I've literally walked into a door thinking I understood how it opened. Another time I opened a window and it opened a way I'd never seen before, and I thought I broke the window. And I've stood in airports trying to figure out how to get water running, and some guy stands next to me, he's like, and just, shows me. And it's just like, there are so many different ways that things are done in other parts of the world. Everything takes longer. I'm going to get lost every single time. And that's just part of the journey.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
part of the ongoing lessons. When you're in Vietnam and there's 10 times the amount of motorcycles there are cars, crossing the street is like your own version of Frogger.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Cool. Okay. What else? What's any closing thoughts or things that you want to, other bits of wisdom that you've picked up over the years that you want to leave us with, or otherwise, this has been great. I've enjoyed this conversation.
I have one question for you, Jonathan.
Okay, I'll take Joey's question and then see if I can come up with some sort of
Okay,
summation.
What
Okay.
are you listening to, reading, or watching currently that is delighting you? Of
Okay, so when I travel, I read Stephen King
course you do.
because he's really good for airports and buses and trains and
Yep.
like it's good writing, but it's not like trying to read Finnegan's Rainbow where you're like,
Right.
you-
Super concentrated.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I don't read Stephen King when I'm at home. I read other things, because I've been traveling a lot this year, I've been reading Stephen King.
And he has a few new ones out, doesn't he not?
Yes, he did. I just
Yeah.
finished his new one. And then I gave it to somebody at a conference as a gift because they told me they read 60 books a year. So I said, here, take it.
What's your
'cause-
favorite Stephen King novel?
I'll go back to On Writing. I just
Uh-huh.
think,
It's
that-
pretty great.
yeah. And then when it comes to music, I like ambient, spacious music because that's how I often get work done. Whereas if there's a lot of words in it, I start listening to the words more than listening to whatever I'm attempting to write or create or do. So that's what I listen to when I'm working. And every time I create a production, I find a song for it that to me becomes the song of that production.
Yes. That's
Right.
smart.
Yeah. And then as far as like what I'm watching, just going to movies when I can, but post COVID, movies don't have the same allure that they used to.
Yeah.
And then streaming, streaming. There's so many great things on streaming, but it's hard to say which is like the favorite because it's more like what drug are you using now?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, as soon as that series is over, okay, great, and then it's gone.
Yep.
And you're like, what
Yep.
else? Like, just last night I watched 2 episodes of the 2nd season of Wednesday
Oh, okay.
Oh,
because that was like late at night, But I'm also watching Alien Earth.
yeah, I'm watching that too. Yeah. It's okay. It's all right. That world, so I'll watch anything they put out. But yeah, it's good.
Right? And it is interesting having had the life that I had. I'm acquainted with so many people that are on TV
Mhm.
or in movies that I'll go, oh, there's that person. There's that person. Britt Lauer, who is the Emmy-nominated lead actress from Severance.
Oh, right.
Yes. Yeah. She was one of the 3 champions of our first ever college improv tournament national championship. She was on a team from Northwestern called Old Tom Jar. And it was our first year that we ever did our college improv tournament. And so she was our first ever national champion. Or her team was, not just her, but her team,
Mhm.
the 3-person team. And, when I see what Britt's doing, I'm just so thrilled for her. Bowen Yang, who's on Saturday Night Live,
Mhm.
was somebody who was in our college improv tournament. And he also made it to our nationals with representing NYU in a group called Danger Box. And there's a woman named Nicole Colin who worked with him, who is like a writer for Colbert. So like they were really strong. So just like all those things, seeing different people that I know is fairly common. I'll be like, oh, look, there's that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's cool.
that's always fun. And then did I answer your question, Joey?
You did. You answered. You answered all 3. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Last bit of wisdom. If you haven't already expended it all.
Sure. 1, buy green chili.
Yes.
There you go.
This is the
That's green
time.
chili. Yeah,
That's green
I
chili.
have it in my fridge right now. It goes good on everything.
Yep.
You don't know it when you start it because your mouth is, but it goes good on everything. So buy green chili. 2, know it's okay to make mistakes, and that doesn't mean that you're a mistake. 3, forgive yourself. Especially because a lot of other people might not forgive you, so you've got to forgive yourself. And it even matters more to forgive yourself than it does to forgive other people. Especially if you've done something that's a mistake and you're an entrepreneur and something crashed and burned. It's really easy to then put yourself in a shame spiral and desperation, and then you're looking to your next project, your next business to make up for everything that it was, and then you're doing it wrong because you're not allowing your next project to be its own project, which is why you have to learn to forgive yourself. And my last bit of thing that I'll share is that I firmly believe to play is a divine right of being alive.
This has felt
Yep.
informative and spiritual and fun. This has been a joy. Thank you so much for doing this today.
You're very welcome, Joey. Dan is one of many people who've been saying to me, like, are you going to write a book? Are you going to make a book? And I recently realized that if I were to make a book, that would be its title. To play is a divine right of being alive.
Love it.
Yep. Cool. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Really appreciate you as always. Good to see you, buddy.
Such a pleasure to meet you, Jonathan.
So nice to meet you, Joey. And if you ever run into Denise Schultz again, give her my best.
I will.
Awesome.
And very nice to meet you, Maureen, even though we didn't speak. But thank you for all the preliminary help that you did with this.
Thank you. This was great. Amazing. There were so many good nuggets of wisdom. Wow.
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
And Dan, I hope you and Kelly and Winston had a great time in the UK.
We did. We enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Good.
Cool.
And good luck with your ongoing master's and early doctorate thesis. I look forward to calling you Dr. Dan. One other planet, one other alternative universe where I would have gone into academia. Because I know what I know, enough of what I know, I would be at the level of having my own doctorate from everything that I
100%.
know. And I'd be like, you know, probably traveling to different colleges and universities teaching, you know, because I could definitely see that as well.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. All right.
All right.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Oh my gosh, there was so much gold in there.
What a lovely man.
I'm going. Yeah, he's a really a great guy. Yeah, I love him. He really is a friend who pops up when I need him, kind of situation. And then he goes away, and I don't see him for a decade. But when he's back, So
Yeah, but he's clearly someone who is influencing a lot of lives in a really positive way.
yep,
It's
Yeah.
very nice to see.
yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, well, this was a good one.
It's fantastic.
Really good, really good. There's so many little clips you could take from this. And he
Yeah.
mentioned so many people that from a marketing perspective, like very, very cool. Lots
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
tentacles. So anyway,
Cool.
and you guys were great. So
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you both.
Thank you
Good
so
to see you.
much.
good
Joe,
day.
I'll be in town next week, so I'll reach out to you and we can get dinner or something.
We'll do a thing. Absolutely.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
All right,
Bye,
see you guys
friends.
later.